Commuter chaos this morning and delays for the day as high levels of water brought services to a standstill. The Met Office says we should be braced for more of this. Forget summer, they say. It's going to...
But the evidence in the record now is becoming clearer and clearer.
No longer assume the temperature of the world is stable.
Более 70 лет, но все еще загрязненность воздуха остается основной.
Average American, that carbon footprint is about 16 tons of carbon emissions.
What about COP26? What is COP?
The potential threats to the surrounding natural environment. We can see the ocean becoming the UN is calling the world's first climate change fast.
Frequency of scientists are correct in their fears.
A sure sign of climate change.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
No, that's because the more we take, the less there is for future generations.
On our warming planet, there are reasons for hope. We need to have the courage to try.
A lot more jobs created in the green economy.
Climate change is not the problem. Climate change is the expression of the problem.
Renewable energy technologies to fundamentally transform the energy system are at our disposal.
So how do we begin the process of reversing global warming?
And this kind of
really glad people are starting to buy electric cars and
launched the largest tree plantation campaign.
It is now cheaper to build offshore wind farms.
To develop that climate-altering
By
crop.
continually reinvesting in our grasslands, we are looking down on
A critical moment that we cannot not be part of.
enormous opportunity in agriculture.
we can become stubborn optimists. 26 is one of the most important diplomatic gatherings in
But humanity already knows what to do.
Do it overnight, but we can set that end date.
We've got a long way to go.
But there is momentum.
Roll up your sleeves and do it.
Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, Lords, Ladies and Gentlemen, please welcome His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how devastating a global cross-border threat can be. Climate change and biodiversity loss are no different. In fact, they pose an even greater existential threat, to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing. Having myself had the opportunity of consulting many of you over these past 18 months, I know you all carry a heavy burden on your shoulders, and you do not need me to tell you that the eyes and hopes of the world are upon you, to act with all dispatch and decisively, because time has quite literally run out. The recent IPCC report gave us a clear diagnosis of the scale of the problem. We know what we must do. With a growing global population creating ever-increasing demand on the planet's finite resources, we have to reduce emissions urgently and take action to tackle the carbon already in the atmosphere, including from coal-fired power stations. Putting a value on carbon, thus making carbon capture solutions more economical, is therefore absolutely critical. Similarly, after billions of years of evolution, nature is our best teacher. In this regard, restoring natural capital, accelerating nature-based solutions, and leveraging the circular bioeconomy will be vital to our efforts. As we tackle this crisis, our efforts cannot be a series of independent initiatives running in parallel. The scale and scope of the threat we face call for a global systems-level solution based on radically transforming our current fossil fuel-based economy to one that is genuinely renewable and sustainable. So, ladies and gentlemen, my plea today is for countries to come together to create the environment that enables every sector of industry to take the action required. We know this will take trillions, not billions of dollars. We also know that countries, many of whom are burdened by growing levels of debt, simply cannot afford to go green. Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. With trillions at its disposal, far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders, it offers the only real prospect of achieving fundamental economic transition. So, how do we do it? First, how do we get the private sector all pulling in the same direction? After nearly 2 years now of consultation, CEOs have told me that we need to bring together global industries to map out, in very practical terms, what it will take to make the transition. We know from the pandemic that the private sector can speed up timelines dramatically when everyone agrees on the urgency and the direction. So each sector needs a clear strategy to speed up the process of getting innovations to market. Second, who pays and how? We need to align private investment behind these industry strategies to help finance the transition efforts, which means building the confidence of investors so that the financial risk is reduced. Crucially, investment is needed to help transition from coal to clean energy. If we can develop a pipeline of many more sustainable and bankable projects at a sufficient scale, it will attract greater investment. Third, which switches do we flick to enable these objectives? More than 300 of the world's leading CEOs and institutional investors have told me that alongside the promises countries have made, their nationally determined contributions, they need clear market signals, agreed globally, so that they have the confidence to invest without the goalposts suddenly moving. This is the framework I've offered in the Terracotta Roadmap, created by my Sustainable Markets Initiative, with nearly 100 specific actions for acceleration. Together, we are working to drive trillions of dollars in support of transition across 10 of the most emitting and polluting industries. They include energy, agriculture, transportation, health systems, and fashion. The reality of today's global supply chains means that industry transition will affect every country and every producer in the world. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the private sector is ready to play its part and to work with governments to find a way forward. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, many of your countries I know are already feeling the devastating impact of climate change through ever-increasing droughts, mudslides, floods, hurricanes, cyclones and wildfires, as we've just seen on that terrifying film. Any leader who has had to confront such life-threatening challenges knows that the cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of prevention. So I can only urge you, as the world's decision-makers, to find practical ways of overcoming differences so we can all get down to work together to rescue this precious planet and save the threatened future of our young people. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Please welcome the COP26 People's Advocate, who has dedicated his lifetime to highlighting the beauty of the natural world, Sir David Attenborough.
Your Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as you spend the next 2 weeks debating, negotiating, persuading and compromising, as you surely must, it's easy to forget that ultimately the emergency climate comes down to a single number: the concentration of carbon in our atmosphere. The measure that greatly determines global temperature. And the changes in that one number is the clearest way to chart our own story, for it defines our relationship with our world. For much of humanity's ancient history, that number bounced wildly between 180 and 300. And so too did global temperatures. It was a brutal and unpredictable world. At times, our ancestors existed only in tiny numbers. But just over 10,000 years ago, that number suddenly stabilized, and with it, Earth's climate. We found ourselves in an unusually benign period, with predictable seasons and reliable weather. For the first time, civilization was possible, and we wasted no time in taking advantage of that. Everything we've achieved in the last 10,000 years was enabled by the stability during this time. The global temperature has not wavered over this period by more than plus or minus 1 degree Celsius. Until now. Our burning of fossil fuels, our destruction of nature, our approach to industry, construction and learning are releasing carbon into the atmosphere at an unprecedented pace and scale. We are already in trouble. The stability we all depend on is breaking. This story is one of inequality as well as instability. Today, those who've done the least to cause this problem are being the hardest hit. ultimately, all of us will feel the impact, some of which are now unavoidable.
My world is melting.
You think you have control, we actually have no control.
I'm absolutely terrified to bring a child to this world.
Is this how our story is due to end? A tale of the smartest species doomed by that all-too-human characteristic of failing to see the bigger picture in pursuit of short-term goals. Perhaps the fact that the people most affected by climate change are no longer some imagined future generation, but young people alive today. Perhaps that will give us the impetus we need to rewrite our story, to turn this tragedy into a triumph. We are, after all, the greatest problem solvers to have ever existed on Earth. We now understand this problem. We know how to stop the number rising and put it in reverse. We must have carbon emissions, halt them this decade. We must recapture billions of tons of carbon from the air. We must fix our sights on keeping 1.5 degrees within reach. A new industrial revolution, powered by millions of sustainable innovations, is essential and is indeed already beginning. We will all share in the benefits. Affordable clean energy, healthy air, and enough food to sustain us all. Nature is a key ally. Wherever we restore the wild, it will recapture carbon and help us bring back balance to our planet. And as we work to build a better world, we must acknowledge no nation has completed its development because no advanced nation is yet sustainable. All have a journey still to compete, so that all nations have a good standard of living and a modest footprint. We're going to have to learn together how to achieve this, ensuring none are left behind. We must use this opportunity to create a more equal world, and our motivation should not be fear, but hope.
Can we fix climate problem in one generation? My answer would be yes, we have to.
We need to not just to talk about what we can do, but to do what we can.
This is a challenge that we should try to solve in a quick way with a long-term vision.
It comes down to this. The people alive now are the generation to come. Will look at this conference and consider one thing. Did that number stop rising and start to drop as a result of commitments made here? There's every reason to believe that the answer can be yes. If, working apart, we are a force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely, working together, we are powerful enough to save it. In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellency, is why the world is looking to you and why you are here. Thank you.
Please welcome the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley.
Royal Highness, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has taught us that national solutions to global problems do not work. We come to Glasgow with global ambition to save our people and to save our planet, but we now find three gaps. On mitigation, climate pledges or NDCs, without more, we will leave the world on a pathway to 2.7 degrees, and with more, we are still likely to get to 2 degrees. These commitments, made by some, are based on technologies yet to be developed, and this is at best reckless and at worst dangerous. On finance, we are $20 billion short of the $100 billion, and this commitment, even then, might only be met in 2023. On adaptation finance remains only at 25%, not the 50-50 split that was promised nor needed given the warming that is already taking place on this earth. Climate finance to frontline small island developing states declined by 25% in 2019. Failure to provide the critical finance and that of loss and damage is measured, my friends, in lives and livelihoods in our communities. This is immoral and it is unjust. If Glasgow is to deliver on the promises of Paris, it must close these three gaps. So I ask to you, what must we say to our people living on the front line in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Pacific, when both ambition and regrettably some of the needed faces at Glasgow are not present? What excuse should we give for the failure? In the words of that Caribbean icon, Eddie Grant, will they mourn us on the front line? When will we, as world leaders across the world, address the pressing issues that are truly causing our people angst and worry, whether it is climate or whether it is vaccines? Simply put, when will leaders lead? Our people are watching, and our people are taking note. And are we really going to leave Scotland without the resolve and the ambition that is sorely needed to save lives and to save our planet? How many more voices and how many more pictures of people must we see on these screens without being able to move? Or are we so blinded and hardened that we can no longer appreciate the cries of humanity? I have been saying to Barbadians for many years that many hands make light work. Today, we need the correct mix of voices, ambition, and action. Do some leaders in this world believe that they can survive and thrive on their own? Have they not learned from the pandemic? Can there be peace and prosperity if 1/3 of the world literally prospers and the other 2/3 of the world live under siege and face calamitous threats to our well-being? What the world needs now, my friends, is that which is within the ambit of less than 200 persons who are willing and prepared to lead. Leaders must not fail those who elect them to lead. And I say to you, there is a sword that can cut down this Gordian knot, and it has been wielded before. The central banks of the wealthiest countries engaged in $25 trillion of quantitative easing in the last 13 years. 25 trillion. Of that, 9 trillion was in the last 18 months to fight the pandemic. Had we used that 25 trillion to purchase bonds, to finance the energy transition, or the transition of how we eat, or how we move ourselves in transport, we would now today be reaching that 1.5 degrees limit that is so vital to us. I say to you today in Glasgow that an annual increase in the SDRs of $500 billion a year for 20 years, put in a trust to finance the transition is the real gap, Secretary General, that we need to close, not the 50 billion being proposed for adaptation. And if 500 billion sounds big to you, guess what? It is just 2% of the 25 trillion. This is the sword we need to wield. Our excitement 1 hour into this event is far less than it was 6 months ago, leading up to this event. Can we, with those voices and these speeches from Sir David and others, find it within ourselves to get the resolve to bring Glasgow back on track? Or do we leave today believing that it was a failure before it starts? Our world, my friends, stands at a fork in the road. One no less significant than when the United Nations was formed in 1945. But then, the majority of our countries here did not exist. We exist now. The difference is we want to exist 100 years from now. And if our existence is to mean anything, then we must act in the interests of all of our people who are dependent on us. And if we don't, we will allow the path of greed and selfishness to sow the seeds of our common destruction. The leaders of today, not 2030, not 2050, must make this choice. It is in our hands. And our people and our planet need it more than ever. We can work with who is ready to go, because the train is ready to leave. And those who are not yet ready, we need to continue to ring circle and to remind them that their people, not our people, but their citizens, need them to get on board as soon as possible. Code red to the G7 countries. Code red to the G20. Earth to COP, that's what it said. Earth to COP. For those who have eyes to see, for those who have ears to listen, and for those who have a heart to feel, 1.5 is what we need to survive. 2 degrees, yes, SG, is a death sentence for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, for the people of the Maldives, for the people of Dominica and Fiji, for the people of Kenya and Mozambique, and yes, for the people of Samoa and Barbados. We do not want that dreaded death sentence. And we've come here today to say, try harder, because our people, the climate army, the world, the planet, needs our actions now, not next year, not in the next decade. Thank you.
Bringing their message from their countries to COP, we will now hear from climate campaigners in Chile and Egypt.
Mi nombre es Isis Riquelme, activista climática, ecofeminista y estudiante de geografía de Chile, y hoy les hablo para que se escuche la voz de la juventud de Latinoamérica. Debemos escuchar el mensaje que nuestro planeta nos envía. El mundo no está mal porque hay una pandemia, hay pandemias porque el mundo está mal. Hago un llamado a los líderes del mundo a que comprometan acciones concretas para detener la extinción de nuestras especies y de la humanidad. Hoy, los jóvenes alrededor del mundo hemos demostrado ser el presente a través de proyectos e ideas que aportan a mitigar y o adaptarse a la crisis climática. Es deber de todos los gobiernos escucharnos, es nuestro futuro el que está en juego. Las niñas y jóvenes mujeres latinoamericanas albergan sueños e ideas del mañana. Nos hemos empoderado de nuestras capacidades y hemos avanzado en materia de educación socioambiental para enfrentar esta crisis. Los proyectos que los jóvenes impulsamos para abordar el cambio son un claro ejemplo de soluciones viables y concretas para entregar las herramientas necesarias para la adaptación y empoderar a nuestras comunidades a ser agentes de cambio a lo largo de los territorios. Hemos organizado los continentes para proteger nuestros océanos por la biodiversidad invaluable que albergan. Hemos instado a la sociedad civil de 80 países a realizar acciones concretas para mitigar la crisis climática y levantar exigencias y propuestas que ustedes puedan ejecutar en sus países. Nosotros, sus niños, sus hijos, hemos decidido colaborar globalmente para cuidar nuestro hogar, pero son ustedes quienes deciden cómo reedificarlo. Les insto a que escuchen y actúen. Debemos seguir construyendo sobre la ambición climática de la presidencia chilena en la COP25, trabajar localmente para impactar globalmente y tomar en cuenta el conocimiento de la sociedad civil. Este es mi mensaje desde el planeta a la COP. Ayúdennos por favor a garantizar un futuro mejor. En sus manos están nuestras vidas y las de los que vienen. Lo que decidan en esta conferencia cambiará el rumbo de la humanidad. Es tiempo de actuar.
تحياتي، أنا عبد الفتاح ندى، ناشط في قضية التغير المناخي ورائد أعمال اجتماعي في مجال التمكين الاقتصادي. أحدثكم من مصر لأنقل لكم رسالة باسم شباب الأرض التي باتت مهددة بخطر التغير المناخي يوما بعد يوم، بل دقيقة تلو الأخرى. النشطاء الشباب من كل أنحاء العالم يتكاتفون سويا من أجل رفع الوعي العالمي تجاه مشكلات التغير المناخي، فلابد أن يدرك الجميع أن تلك المشكلات ليست رفاهية، إنما تشكل مصيرنا الذي يتحدد من خلال كل قرار فردي نقوم به يوميا، سواء يضر بهذه البيئة أو يساهم في منحها فرصة أخرى في البقاء. حان الوقت الآن أن يبني قادة العالم أجمع على جهودنا كنشطاء، وأن يضعوا السياسات العامة التي تتصدى لأزمة المناخ في مقدمة أولوياتهم. لقد قضيت ال6 سنوات الماضية في العمل مع المجتمعات المحلية الأقل حظا في التنمية داخل مصر، من خلال تدريب الشباب والقادة المجتمعيين على ريادة الأعمال الاجتماعية والتمكين الاقتصادي باستخدام نماذج المشاريع الصديقة للبيئة. وقد وجدت أن هناك الكثير من الفرص لتحقيق التمكين الاقتصادي في تلك المناطق من خلال تلك المشاريع الخضراء. فعلى الرغم من النظرة إلى هذه المناطق أنها لا تعتبر مشكلات المناخ من ضمن أولوياتها، إلا أن الشباب هناك لديهم الكثير من الحلول المبتكرة لبدء مشاريعهم الاجتماعية الصديقة للبيئة، والتي تمكنهم من تحقيق دخل مادي بالإضافة للتصدي لأزمة التغير المناخي. هذه رسالتي من كوكب الأرض لقمة المناخ. أدعو قادة العالم لوضع مفاهيم الاقتصاد الأخضر والاقتصاد الدوار على رأس قائمة السياسات الاقتصادية العالمية في السنوات المقبلة. أؤمن بأن ذلك قد يساهم في تحويل تلك المحنة لمنحة حقيقية. أخيرا، يأمل شباب مصر في ضيافة قمة المناخ التالية، ونرحب بكم في العام القادم لرؤية نموذج مشرف من جهود شباب مصر لحماية كوكبنا وضمان مستقبل أفضل لكل من يعيش عليه. فقط تخيلوا ما يمكننا تحقيقه معا إذا وضعنا هذا الهدف كمهمتنا الجماعية. شكرا جزيلا.
15% of the world's population have a disability. Here is a message on their behalf.
My name is Eddie Ndopu. Today, I'm speaking to you on behalf of the world's largest minority, the 15% of people in the world who have a disability. But make no mistake, there is nothing minor about who we are. We are larger than life, but because of systemic exclusion and inequality, our power and brilliance is often ignored or diminished. As an ambassador for the We the 15 campaign, I am here to tell you that we refuse to be rendered invisible in the climate action conversation. The impact of climate change is disproportionate for disabled people around the world. The change that climate change is creating is no longer a debate about the future or what might happen, because it is happening. We are some of the planet's most vulnerable citizens and some of the most resilient. But Earth is equally vulnerable, and its resilience is not without limits. We are dangerously close to reaching those limits. In my home in South Africa, I see the impact of climate change on our communities, on our economy, on our ability to grow food, and even to survive. I see a generation growing up with fear in their hearts at what the future holds. On behalf of everyone, disabled and non-disabled all around the world, I call on you to commit to concrete actions to stop the destruction of this magnificent planet. This conference is one of the most important meetings in history. You have the chance to make decisions and reach agreements which will affect the lives of generations to come. You are in a position of extraordinary power. You can change forever the trajectory we are on. You can make a world that is once again full of hope, not fear. This is my message from Earth to COP. On behalf of We the 15, I ask you, please help us to guarantee a safer future for every life, regardless of their ability.
Please welcome the Prime Minister of Italy, Mario Draghi.
Prime Minister Johnson, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the speeches we've just heard resonate deeply with me. Over the last few years, young people have done us a service by bringing the climate agenda on the front of our political debate. Young people were the center of the pre-COP summit in Milan. In Glasgow, here, we need to make them proud. Projected rise in global temperatures is set to affect dramatically life on our planet. From catastrophic fires and floods we've seen now, to the bleaching of coral reefs, to the loss of biodiversity, the impact of climate change is already all too evident. Its price also rising fast, especially for the poorer nations. The cost of disruptions for households and companies in low and middle-income countries amounts to a staggering $390 billion a year. Climate change also has serious repercussions on global peace and security. It can deplete natural resources and worsen social tensions, lead to new migration flows, and contribute to terrorism and organized crime. Climate change can tear us apart. Thanks to the constant dialogue and cooperation, we made good progress on addressing climate change. The G20 accounts for around 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions and around 80% of global GDP. At last weekend summit in Rome, its member states agreed that we must limit the rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees, was the first time, and committed to achieve net zero emissions by or around mid-century. We decided to step up our actions starting from this decade, enhance our nationally determined contributions, and stop the international public funding of unabated new coal by the end of this year. Here, at the COP26, we must now go further than we did at G20. We need to speed up our commitment to keep the rise in temperatures below 1.5 degrees. We need to build on the G20 agreement and act faster and more decisively. We must strengthen our efforts in the realm of climate finance. We must bring together the public and the private sector in new ways. We had a roadmap just made by Prince Charles. Prime Minister Johnson highlighted the amount of private money available. It's tens of trillions. But now we've got to use them. Now we have to find an intelligent way to spend them and spend them quickly. We need, first and foremost, that all multilateral development banks, and especially the World Bank, co-share with the private sector risks that the private sector alone cannot bear. We need country-based platforms where the World Bank and other banks, multilateral development banks, can actually co-share and make all this money usable to a good effort. This is the first, in a sense, great news that Prime Minister Johnson gave us today. That money is not a concern if we want to use it well. This COP26 must be the start of a new momentum, a quantum leap in our fight against climate change. And our youth must be at the center of this process. We intend to turn the Youth for Climate event we held in Milan into a regular feature of all COPs. Future generations will judge us for what we achieve or fail to achieve. We must involve them, listen to them, and above all, learn from them. Thank you.
Please welcome back Yrsa Daly-Ward.
On Earth Day 2021, a competition was launched to give young people across the UK the opportunity to bring their voice to COP26. Together with Blue Peter, the longest-running children's programme in the world, COP26 asked them to use their creativity to send a message to you, the decision-makers of our planet. Thousands of children took part, and the film you're about to see brings to life the winning story written by Delphine, who has joined us here at the ceremony today. Delphine's story reminds us of what is so special about our world and why we should do everything in our power to protect our planet.
Delphine was a girl born in 2099. One day, her gran gave her a book, heavy with a spine. There were photographs of creatures she'd never ever seen. What are they, Gran, these animals? What does this all mean? Gran sighed. Many years ago, they roamed the earth and seas. But we bulldozed their homes and burnt down their trees. We put plastic in their oceans and greenhouse gases in the sky. But why did you let them, Gran? Why? Oh, why? Oh, why? I was just a child, she said. I shouted, no one took heed. Businessmen wanted money. It was nothing more than greed. That night, Delphine read on, and her eyes grew bigger and wider. And when she fell asleep, the creatures came to life inside her. A giant cat with golden stripes and glowing orange eyes. A candy floss pink bird taking off across the skies. A funny little lizard with colour-changing skin. Some speedy silver fish with spikes upon their fins. When the sun came up, the menagerie faded away, and Delphine's heart felt heavy in the cold grey light of day. Do you recognise them, dear readers of this tale?
In 2021, they're not figments for girls' imagination. We must protect them where we can for future generations.
To close the ceremony, please welcome climate and environmental activist Elizabeth Watuti.
My name is Elizabeth Watuti. I am a youth climate activist from Kenya. I have done a lot of soul-searching about what to say here today. I have asked myself over and over what words might move you. And then I realized that making my 4 minutes count does not rest solely on me. My truth will only land if you have the grace to fully listen. My story will only move you if you can open up your heart. I can urge you to act at the pace and scale necessary, but in the end, your will to act must come from deep within. I need to tell you what is happening in my home country. Right now, as we sit comfortably here in this conference center in Glasgow, over 2 million of my fellow Kenyans are facing climate-related starvation. In this past year, both of our rainy seasons have failed, and scientists say that it may be another 12 months before the waters return again. Meanwhile, our rivers are running dry, our harvests are failing, our storehouses stand empty, our animals and people are dying. I have seen with my own eyes 3 young children crying at the side of a dried-up river after walking 12 miles with their mother to find water. Please open your hearts. This is not only happening in Kenya. Over the past few months, there have been deadly heat waves and wildfires in Algeria and devastating floods in Uganda and Nigeria. And there is more still to come. By 2025, in just 4 years' time, half of the world's population will be facing water scarcity. And by the time I'm 50, the climate crisis will have displaced 86 million people in sub-Saharan Africa alone. I would like you to join me in holding a moment of compassionate silence for the billions of people who are not here with us today, whose stories are not being heard, and whose suffering is not being felt. Please open your hearts. If you allow yourself to feel it, the heartbreak and the injustice is hard to bear. Sub-Saharan Africans are responsible for just 0.5% of historical emissions. The children are responsible for none, but they are bearing the brunt. We are the adults on this earth right now, and it is our responsibility to ensure that the children have food and water. I have been doing what I can. Inspired by the great Professor Wangari Maathai, I founded the Green Generation Initiative, a tree-growing initiative that enhances food security for young Kenyans. So far, we have grown 30,000 fruit trees to maturity, providing desperately needed nutrition for thousands of children. Every day, we see that when we look after the trees, they look after us. But these trees and the life-saving fruit they bear will not survive on a 2.7 degrees Celsius warmer planet. The decisions you make here will help determine whether the rains will return to our land. The decisions you make here will help determine whether the fruit trees we plant will live or perish. The decisions you make here will help determine whether children will have food and water. I I believe in our human capacity to care deeply and to act collectively. I believe in our ability to do what is right if we let ourselves feel it in our hearts. So for these next 2 weeks, let us feel it in our hearts. The children cannot live on words and empty promises. They are waiting for you to act. Please open your hearts and then act. Thank you.
You have heard Earth's impassioned message to you all. Earth is calling for action this day. This has been Earth to COP.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, may I please ask you to take your seats in order for us to begin with the high-level segment for heads of state and government. Thank you.
You're beautiful, Nora. Not that short.
You know what? No, that's not. No, they made another. No. No, look, Jim. Listen, they made another mark.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I please request you to take your seats? We're about to start. Distinguished heads of state and government, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests, welcome to the opening of the first part of the high-level segment on the occasion of the 26th session of the Conference of the Parties, the 16th session of the Conference of the Parties serving as a meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol, and the third session of the Conference of the Parties serving as a meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. Today, heads of state and governments will deliver national statements in parallel plenaries, Ken Grom and Penny Fan. Before we begin, I would like to remind distinguished heads of state and government of actions in place to ensure effective time management. There is a 3-minute time limit for statements during the high-level segment. Statements should be as concise as possible, noting that full text of the official statements will be made available on the UNFCCC website. And finally, please note that heads of state or government who are not in the plenary at the time for delivery of their statements will be rescheduled to speak at the end of all statements of the same category. As part of the hygiene measures to ensure a safe environment of all participants, statements will be delivered from alternate rostrums. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests, I'm delighted that so many of you have joined us here in Glasgow to make your vital national statements. I invite you all to take this opportunity to demonstrate how your country has strengthened its commitments under the Paris Agreement, to tell us what steps you are taking to deliver these targets and plans, and crucially, how together we can do more. On this stage today, you have the chance to send a clear signal to your negotiators and the world about what must be achieved at COP26 and why we must work together to accelerate climate action in this decisive decade. As you all know, the science is clear that the window of time that we have to keep the Paris temperature goal in reach and to avoid the worst effects of climate change is closing fast. But with political will and commitment, we can and must deliver an outcome in Glasgow the world can be proud of. I'm also pleased that after the national statements today and in breaks in the programme tomorrow, we will hear from a selection of leading voices across civil society, business and finance to celebrate and showcase action and ambition across all 3 pillars of the Paris Agreement. At this time, I will now close the video link connecting the plenaries, and we will proceed with the delivery of national statements in both plenaries. At the end of the delivery of national statements in each plenary, the meeting will be adjourned. The world will be listening intently to your statements. It is now my great pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Pedro Sánchez Pérez Castillon, President of the Government of Spain. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Presidentes de Gobierno, primeros ministros, delegados y delegadas, desde que nos reunimos en Madrid hace ya 2 años, la certeza sobre los catastróficos riesgos de la emergencia climática es cada vez mayor. Como nos recordaba en su intervención el secretario general de Naciones Unidas, los científicos certifican el código rojo en el que nos encontramos. Es evidente que necesitamos un nuevo orden internacional que reconozca el papel de todos los actores, de los gobiernos, de las administraciones públicas, de la ciudadanía, de las empresas, del sector financiero, como agentes imprescindibles del cambio, que asuma que esta década es clave y que consiga alinear la ambición a corto plazo con una mirada de largo alcance. La buena noticia es que sabemos lo que hay que hacer, pero necesitamos determinación política y acción inmediata. El primer objetivo debe ser reducir emisiones y elevar nuestro nivel de ambición, de modo que el objetivo del 1,5 de grados centígrados sigue siendo un objetivo a nuestro alcance. Debemos apostar por las energías renovables, la eficiencia energética, la movilidad limpia, la conservación y la restauración de nuestros ecosistemas y la rehabilitación urbana. Debemos abandonar los combustibles fósiles y es fundamental proteger la biodiversidad y preservar nuestros océanos y la Antártica. Por eso, mi país, España, ha reducido la generación eléctrica de carbón en un 90% en estos últimos 4 años. Y además lo hemos hecho con diálogo y con paz social, porque la transición ecológica debe ser justa. Nuestras sociedades, y este es uno de los principales retos que tenemos por delante, deben percibir la transición ecológica no como una amenaza, sino como una inmensa oportunidad de crecimiento económico inclusivo. Estamos en este sentido también en nuestro país, en España, dando pasos decisivos para alinear nuestras inversiones, tanto públicas como privadas, con el objetivo de la neutralidad climática. Hemos dotado a nuestro país de la primera ley de cambio climático y transición energética, que así lo establece, y la decisión de destinar casi 30.000 millones de euros en los próximos 3 años a la transición ecológica es la mejor expresión de nuestra voluntad política. En segundo lugar, debemos crear marcos adecuados para nuestras políticas de adaptación, algo cuya importancia España entiende bien, ya que nuestro país es especialmente vulnerable a fenómenos extremos. A nivel doméstico, contamos con un segundo Plan Nacional a 2030 y hemos enviado la comunicación de adaptación de España a Naciones Unidas. También vamos a reforzar nuestra acción exterior en este ámbito y por eso mi país, España, va a aportar 30 millones de euros al Fondo de Adaptación de Naciones Unidas en 2022. En tercer lugar, si elevamos nuestro nivel de ambición, debemos respaldar objetivos con recursos. Por eso el cumplimiento del objetivo de los 100.000 millones de dólares va a ser una de las pruebas de fuego de la COP26 a la hora de recuperar la confianza entre los países del norte y el sur. España hará de su parte. Nos comprometemos a aumentar la financiación climática para llegar en 2025 con un incremento de un 50% respecto de nuestro compromiso actual. Nuestro objetivo es alcanzar los 1.350 millones de euros anuales a partir de 2025. Además, España va a destinar el 20% de sus derechos especiales de giro a países vulnerables, un mínimo de 350 millones de euros. Y para finalizar, deseo hacer un llamamiento, y es que trabajemos de forma conjunta para que esta COP suponga el punto de inflexión que impulse un verdadero cambio de rumbo del planeta a través de una acción solidaria, contundente y urgente. Una acción que cierre las brechas de desigualdad y que permita a todos percibir los beneficios de la acción climática y de la transición ecológica. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It's now my great pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Ghazouani, President of Mauritania. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
أصحاب الفخامة والمعالي السادة والسيدات رؤساء الدول والحكومات، صاحب المعالي رئيس الدورة 26 لمؤتمر الأطراف في الاتفاقية الإطارية للأمم المتحدة حول التغير المناخي، معالي السيد الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، السادة والسيدات ممثلو المنظمات الحكومية وغير الحكومية، أيها السادة والسيدات، le réchauffement climatique, du fait de ses désastreuses conséquences multiformes, constitue aujourd'hui un défi de premier ordre que l'humanité tout entière se doit impérativement de relever. Cette 6e conférence des parties à la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques nous offre l'occasion de saluer l'élan international en faveur de l'action climatique et de réaffirmer la nécessité de placer la transition écologique au sommet des priorités stratégiques de l'agenda 2030 et de toutes les politiques publiques de relance post-Covid. En effet, il est nécessaire que nos États mettent en œuvre individuellement et collectivement toutes les mesures qui requièrent la construction de trajectoires de développement écologique plus sobres en carbone, plus résilientes et plus inclusives. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la Mauritanie vient de réviser sa contribution nationale climat. Et bien que nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre soient très marginales, nous avons prévu de les réduire de 11% par rapport à 2018 à l'horizon 2030. Avec un appui financier extérieur plus conséquent, nous pourrions atteindre la neutralité carbone en 2030. Les efforts que nous avons consentis sur la période 2015-2021 nous ont permis de porter la part des énergies renouvelables dans le mix énergétique de 18% en 2015 à 34% en 2020. Et nous prévoyons d'atteindre un taux de 50% en 2030. Ces résultats sont complétés par le lancement d'un nouveau programme de développement de l'hydrogène vert. Grâce à cette nouvelle filière, la Mauritanie offre au monde une source alternative et durable d'énergie propre. Nous invitons les institutions financières et les entreprises intéressées à nous accompagner dans ce projet. En outre, notre contribution nationale climat soutient également la transition écologique et d'autres secteurs ayant un potentiel d'atténuation, comme le transport, l'agriculture, l'élevage et la foresterie. Toutefois, l'adaptation au changement climatique et le renforcement de la résilience des populations vulnérables demeurent notre priorité. Dans ce cadre, des avancées certaines ont déjà été réalisées en matière de restauration des écosystèmes terrestres, particulièrement à travers la mise en œuvre du programme de la Grande Muraille Verte. En janvier dernier, lors du One Planet Summit, des promesses importantes de financement ont été faites pour soutenir la Grande Muraille Verte. La concrétisation de ces promesses est aujourd'hui attendue par des millions d'Africains qui souffrent de la dégradation de leurs moyens d'existence. Aussi, nous invitons la COP26 à faire du programme de la Grande Muraille Verte une priorité internationale. Et demandons plus globalement à ce que les financements en faveur de l'adaptation et de la transition écologique soient significativement augmentés et majoritairement versés sous forme de dons, afin de ne pas aggraver le fardeau de la dette des pays en développement. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, convaincus que l'action climatique est devenue une priorité sociale, environnementale, économique et même sécuritaire, la Mauritanie demeurera pleinement engagée pour faire avancer la coopération climatique internationale et accélérer la transition écologique désormais plus que jamais nécessaire. أيها السادة والسيدات، أصحاب الفخامة والمعالي، قناعة منها بأن العمل المناخي أصبح أولوية اجتماعية وبيئية واقتصادية وأمنية، فإن الجمهورية الإسلامية الموريتانية ستظل ملتزمة بالتعاون الدولي المناخي إسهاما منها في تسريع حصول الانتقال البيئي الذي أصبح اليوم أكثر من أي وقت مضى ضرورة بالغة الإلحاح. شكرا.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my great pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, to state the obvious, we meet with the eyes of history upon us and the profound questions before us. It's simple. Will we act? Will we do what is necessary? Will we seize the enormous opportunity before us? Or will we condemn future generations to suffer? This is the decade that will determine the answer, this decade. The science is clear. We only have a brief window left before us to raise our ambitions and to meet the task that's rapidly narrowing. This is a decisive decade in which we have an opportunity to prove ourselves. We can keep the goal of limiting global warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius within our reach if we come together. If we commit to doing our part of each of our nations with determination and with ambition. That's what COP26 is all about. Glasgow must be the kickoff of a decade of ambition and innovation to preserve our shared future. Climate change is already ravaging the world. We've heard from many speakers. It's not hypothetical. It's not a hypothetical threat. It's destroying people's lives and livelihoods, and doing it every single day. It's costing our nations trillions of dollars. Record heat and drought, fueling more widespread and more intense wildfires in some places and crop failures in others. Record flooding and what used to be a once-in-a-century storms are now happening every few years. In the past few months, the United States has experienced all of this, and every region of the world can tell similar stories. And in an age where this pandemic is made so painfully clear that no nation can wall itself off from borderless threats, we know that none of us can escape the worst that's yet to come if we fail to seize this moment. But, ladies and gentlemen, within the growing catastrophe, I believe there's an incredible opportunity, not just for the United States, but for all of us. We're standing at an inflection point in world history. We have the ability to invest in ourselves and build an equitable, clean energy future, and in the process, create millions of good-paying jobs and opportunities around the world. Cleaner air for our children, more bountiful oceans, healthier forests and ecosystems for our planet. We can create an environment that raises the standard of living around the world. And this is a moral imperative, but it's also an economic imperative. If we fuel greater growth, new jobs, better opportunities for all our people, and as we see current volatility in energy prices, rather than cast it as a reason to back off our clean energy goals, we must view it as a call to action. High energy prices only reinforce the urgent need to diversify sources, double down on clean energy development, and adapt promising new clean energy technologies so we can not only we don't remain overly reliant on one source of power to power our economies and our communities. It's in the self-interest of every single nation. And this is a chance, in my view, to make a generational investment in our economic resilience and on our workers and our communities throughout the world. That's what we're going to do in the United States. My Build Back Better framework will make historic investments in clean energy, the most significant investment to deal with the climate crisis that any advanced nation has made ever. We're going to cut U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by well over a gigaton by 2030, while making it more affordable for consumers to save on their own energy bills, with tax credits for things like installing solar panels, weatherizing their homes. Lowering energy prices will also deliver cleaner air and water for our children electrifying fleets of school buses, increasing credits for electric vehicles, and addressing legacy pollution. It will incentivize clean energy manufacturing, building the solar panels and the wind turbines that are growing energy markets of the future, which will create good-paying union jobs for American workers, and something that none of us should lose sight of. When I talk to the American people about climate change, I tell them it's about jobs. It's about workers who will lay thousands of miles of transmission lines of clean, modern, resilient power grid. The auto workers who build the next generation of electric vehicles and electricians who will install a nationwide network of 500,000 vehicle stations to power them throughout my country. The engineers who will design new carbon capture systems, and the construction workers who will make them a reality. The farmers who will not only help fight global hunger, but also use the soil to fight climate change. The communities that revitalize themselves around new industries and opportunities. And because we are taking all these actions, the United States will be able to meet the ambitious target I set in the Leaders' Summit in Climate back in April, reducing U.S. emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. We'll demonstrate to the world the United States is not only back at the table, but hopefully leading by the power of our example. I know it hasn't been the case, and that's why my administration is working overtime to show that our climate commitment is action, not words. On my very first day in office, I took action to return the United States to the Paris Agreement. Since then, our administration has been hard at work unlocking clean energy breakthroughs to drive down the cost of technologies that will require us to achieve net zero emissions, and working with the private sector on the next generation of technologies that will power a clean economy of the future. Over the next several days, the United States will be announcing new initiatives to demonstrate our commitment to providing innovative solutions across multiple sectors, from agriculture to oil and gas, to combating deforestation, to tackling hard and to abate industries. We're planning for both short-term sprint to 2030 that will keep 1.5 degrees Celsius in reach, and for a marathon that will take us to the finish line and transform the largest economy in the world into a thriving, innovative, equitable, and just clean energy engine of net zero for a net zero world. That's why today I'm releasing the U.S. long-term strategy, which presents a vision of achieving the United States goal of net zero emissions economy-wide by no later than 2050, and reinforces an absolutely critical nature of taking bold action in the decisive decade. We're also going to try to do our part when it comes to helping the rest of the world take action as well. We want to do more to help countries around the world, especially developing countries, accelerate their clean energy transition, address pollution, and ensure the world we all must share a cleaner, safer, healthiest planet. We have an obligation to help. At the United Nations in September, I announced that my administration is working with the Congress to quadruple our climate finance support for developing countries by 2024, including significant increases in support for adaptation efforts. This commitment is made possible to each of our collective goals of mobilizing $100 billion annually for climate finance, but mobilizing finance at the scale necessary to meet the incredible need is an all-hands-on-deck effort. As other speakers today have mentioned, governments in the private sector and multilateral development banks must also do their work to go from millions to billions to trillions, the necessary effect of this transition. Today, I'm also submitting a new adaptation communication laying out how we'll implement the global goal of adaptation, as well as announcing our first ever contribution to the Adaptation Fund. But our commitment is about more than just financing. That's a critical piece of it. But we're also going to support solutions across the board. In the lead up to this gathering, the United States joined our G7 partners to launch a Build Back Better World initiative. We also reconvened the Major Economies Forum on Energy and Climate, to launch transformative actions and to raise ambition. And together with the European Union, we're launching a global methane pledge to collectively reduce methane emissions, one of the most potent greenhouse gases, by at least 30% by the end of the decade. More than 70 countries have already signed up to support rapid reduction of methane pollution, and I encourage every nation to sign on. It's the simple, most effective strategy we have to slow global warming in the near term. My friends, if we're to recognize that a better, more hopeful future of every nation has to do its part, with ambitious targets to keep 1.5 degrees in reach and specific plans on how to get there, especially the major economies. It's imperative that we support developing nations so they can be our partners in this effort. Right now, we're still falling short. There's no more time to hang back or sit on the fence or argue amongst ourselves. This is the challenge of our collective lifetimes, the existential threat to human existence as we know it. And every day we delay, the cost of inaction increases. So let this be the moment that we answer history's call here in Glasgow. Let this be the start of a decade of transformative action that preserves our planet and raises the quality of life for people everywhere. We can do this. We just have to make a choice to do it. So let's get to work, and thank you. Those of us who are responsible for much of the deforestation and all the problems we have so far have an overwhelming obligation to the nations who, in fact, were not there, have not done it. And we have to help much more than we have thus far. God bless you all, and may God save the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'll now request COP Rapporteur Ahmed Rajabi to continue chairing this session.